Good evening, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Father Chris Stubna, the rector and pastor of St. Paul Cathedral Parish. And I want to take this opportunity to extend a very warm welcome to all of you who have come out and are joining us this weekend for the second annual Pittsburgh Encounter. We are delighted to be working in close collaboration with Communion and Liberation to be able once again to provide this wonderful experience where we can, as a community of faith, discuss the relationship between faith and culture. A particularly fitting theme, I think, as we continue to engage in this very special year of faith, a time of grace for the Church. I would like to thank everyone who has worked so hard in organizing this event and preparing for the weekend. Pope Francis had a very beautiful thing to say in Lumen Fidei. Faith is truly a good for everyone. It is a common good. The light of faith does not simply brighten the interior of the Church, Pope Francis said, nor does it serve solely to build an eternal city in the hereafter. It helps us to enlighten our culture and to build our society in such a way that they can journey together towards a future of hope and bring to fulfillment God's designs. I hope that each of you who are here will benefit greatly from this experience. As the Mother Church of the Diocese of Pittsburgh, it is my hope that the Cathedral will provide an oasis for each of you who are here, a place of learning, of friendship, of reflection, and especially a place for prayer. In the celebration of the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, you're most welcome to participate in anything that's happening this weekend at the Cathedral. Please know that we are really delighted, all of us, to welcome you and to have you with us. As we begin this evening, I would like to offer a prayer. We are particularly mindful of the crisis unfolding in Syria, and we join in solidarity with our Holy Father and the Universal Church in tomorrow's day of prayer and fasting for peace. Let us ask God to be particularly present to us in this time of need. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, let us pray. Most holy and loving Father, you have created everything, and you desire that all your creatures will live in peace with one another. We are ever conscious of your goodness to us, your unconditional love and mercy that embraces us each day, and your grace that guides us forward in holiness and in hope. Hear our prayers and petitions that we lift before you this day, especially for the conflict unfolding in Syria and in the Middle East. Be close to all of those who are victims of violence, hatred, and injustice. And through the intercession of our dear Blessed Lady, may our efforts to bring reconciliation, peace, and justice be fruitful and effective. Be with the leaders of our own nation in these deliberations that are ongoing, and be with the leaders of nations throughout the world as decisions are being made in these important days. May each of us in our own way always strive to be advocates for the sanctity and dignity of human life and dispensers of mercy to all. Bless this gathering and all who are present here. May our Catholic faith be a leaven and a light that will help to transform the culture in which we live, to more clearly reflect the truth and the light of the gospel of your Son, Jesus Christ, in whose name we ask this prayer tonight and always. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. There have been many who have worked on behalf of this event this weekend, none perhaps more on the part of St. Paul Cathedral Parish than one of our parochial vicars, Father Michael Roach, who will now come forward and sort of launch our evening. Thank you again for being here, and it's delightful to have all of you. God bless you.
I'd like to begin by thanking Father Studna, who just began our evening with such a beautiful prayer, for that welcome to each of us, and for his support of this venture from its inception in the middle of last year. The first time I mentioned it to him, he was very excited, even after I mentioned it was going to cost money. And for that, I remain very grateful. So what are we doing here tonight in these days? This was a question I was regularly asked in advance of our first Pittsburgh encounter last November. Namely, what are we trying to do? What is the unity that brings together these seemingly different types of exhibits and presentations? Why are we here? I explained at the time, to those who asked me the last time, that at the heart of what we are seeking to do, and this is ultimately a conference put together by a few people in Steubenville, Ohio, and here in Pittsburgh, who are following the charism of Father Luigi Giussani, who founded the movement Communion and Liberation, was to illustrate a fact that where Christ is acknowledged as Lord, this results in lives more open to everything, lives more beautiful, lives more capable of wonder. There was some resistance and skepticism to that retort, but it happened. And that event, for those who came, did in fact illustrate that the faith could be as generative today as it was for the apostles, John and Andrew, who first encountered Jesus in Bethany across the Jordan where John was baptizing, who were able to say, having stayed with him that afternoon, "We have found the Messiah." We saw that through an engagement with some witnesses, that life in Christ, life lived professionally as a scientist, as a poet, as a professor, as a theologian, that this life, that this faith is generative, not simply of a religion, but of a people who are interested, morally more interested in things and events, and who desire to share all of life with others, namely generative of a culture. Faith, we saw, wasn't something for the weak or the weak-minded, an opiate, but really the response of someone who is fully alive with their whole selves, a way of knowing that is truly the highest expression of reason. For it involves not simply my eyes or ears or instruments, but my eye. So in response to the many opportunities I'd answer that question, I said a lot of different things, but the one that ultimately makes the most sense was come and see. The one that Christ gave to his followers across that Jordan River. People did this, and for the past year, many have asked me, "Are you going to do that thing again?" What was it called? They didn't remember. But after reminding them it was called the Pittsburgh Encounter, they were grateful that it was going to happen again. And here we are again, with the expectation that the same thing we saw last year will, with the witnesses of different people from different places, again awaken in us confidence that this is true and beautiful and livable, this faith. We are blessed to have as our keynote speaker tonight Father Vincent Nagle. a priest of the Missionary Fraternity of St. Charles Borromeo, a group of priests born out of the charism of Father Giussani, this communion liberation movement. Father Vincent is originally, as it says in the back of his book, a small village in the redwood forests of Northern California. I think it may have been a commune, but you'll have to ask him. The son of a Catholic father and a Jewish mother. He studied at the Ignatius Institute at the University of California, receiving a degree in social theory and great books. He then worked as an English teacher in Morocco, and then for the Saudi military before returning to Northern California, and where he received a master's in theology from Berkeley. He then entered seminary in Rome for the missionary fraternities of St. Charles, and was ordained in 1992, the first American to be ordained for that community. After ordination, the adventures just continued. He was sent to Nairobi, Kenya to be an Islamics professor, and then to Massachusetts to be a hospital chaplain. That logic, only the mind of God, I imagine. He then spent 6 years working as a priest in the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem. He has now, for the past year, been a retreat master and pilgrimage director based in Rome, Italy, and will soon be moving to Milan to continue that work. I first met Father Vincent in the summer of 2006. I was a young seminarian, just one semester into my studies. I had a million questions, and he patiently suffered them all. We spoke at length about many things, and our conversations, which frankly were only the course of an evening and another day, helped me approach my studies with less fear and more confidence about Christ conquering in every situation. Help me to live those years with greater zeal and much less fear. So with that said, I am delighted to have the privilege of introducing him tonight. So without further ado, Father Vincent Nagle.
Wow, you're all so spread out. You don't know each other, is that right? So, I was toying with making you all uncomfortable and getting up and coming down to being closer to me, because I did take a shower. And even though I was on the plane for 2 days, but I'll leave you where you are. I'll just come to you. I don't usually just give talks. You know, I present books, I give retreats, I give testimonies. I don't usually just give talks. So this isn't really going to be a talk. You know, it's just going to be sharing an experience. Sharing an experience, that's all. And when they asked me what I wanted to talk about, and when I looked over the program, I said, well, for me, what this program says to me, the most important thing that this program says to me is that, you know, our salvation comes through an attraction. The strength of salvation is in attraction. I'm not the first person in the world to say this. Before I get into quoting anybody, I would like to say that when I meditate upon this, that, you know, we are attracted. What attracts us? What attracts us? I remember when I was 13 and I'm from a family of 8, I'm number 6, and yes, I did grow up on, well, is it a hippie commune or is it a hippie commune? You know, this is, you know, only my hairdresser knows. You know, the fact was that we, you know, arrived in this little village of summer cabins for workers in the Redwoods, 2 hours north of San Francisco in 1963. And 1964, the great free speech movement in Berkeley happened. Already in 1965, this had morphed into what then the following summer became the Summer of Love in San Francisco. That was already, Summer of Love was 1966, not 1968. But already in 65, the first hippies were building their communes up in the redwoods. These redwoods are so beautiful, and nature is so beautiful, and it's perfect, and men are so evil, and society is all bad, and nature is so beautiful. But there were on our little tiny, there were 60 full-time residents, 60 year-round residents in this place. But it was full of summer cabins. We lived in a summer cabin year-round. And on either side, there were two big hippie communes. One was called Morning Star. It was a big, very famous place in Wheeler Ranch. But these were real hippie communes. We're starting over a new civilization. So we're going to build our own houses. Do you know how? No, but we're going to do it, Do you know how to build a septic tank? No, but we'll figure it out, Very idealistic, and nobody was wearing clothes, and that was all interesting. But not everybody wanted to live naked in the mud. They loved it, but I don't want to live naked in the mud. But they didn't have a lot of money, but during the winter you could rent these cabins for almost nothing. So, from 1964 to 1965, the population of that, year-round population grew from 60 to almost 400. All of them hippies. And that's where I grew up. So, is it a commune or is it a commune? Well, my mom sure thought it was, and she was all cool about that. My dad sure thought it was, and he wasn't so good about that. But then when he figured out they would all vote Democrat, he was very happy. So I do come from that background, and it's not irrelevant to what I have to say. In fact, you'll see that it's very much part of what I want to say. Because growing up with a lot of, at the beginning, the two words that defined this movement were, come on, you guys are Americans, you know this. The two words of the hippie movement were, peace and love. Peace and love. Two, not three. But yes, already by 1968, it was three words, and they were, I heard it from somebody. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's right, that's three. So that's interesting because three of my siblings did end up becoming drug dealers. Very nice drug dealers, not your mean kind. Well, one tried to be mean for some years, he got over it. But one of my older brothers then, was going around the world on drug deals and ended up getting arrested in Israel. And when he got back home after a few years, I was about 13, and there was a conversation between myself and my grandmother and him, and he said how he had gotten out of prison and gone into Jerusalem that day, and as soon as he had gone into the city, he had seen this beautiful girl walking by and said, I'm going to have that girl. And he said, that night I did have that girl. I'm not trying to scandalize you, I'm sorry about that, But even though I grew up on a hippie commune, we had just moved away from that, we were just living in a town nearby. I was still thinking, man, that sounds hard to do, I walk in, I don't know anybody in this town, I walk into the town, I see a girl, say, I want her, I get her. I was thinking, how'd you manage that? 13-year-old boy wants to know these things. and I don't remember what he said, but I remember my grandmother, what she said. And now my grandmother was not a shrinking violet. My grandmother was a woman of the world. She had been a nightclub dancer, in the speakeasies. She had become a famous Broadway dancer on the Ziegfeld Follies, and then become the very first Revlon cover girl. Yes, there's a lot to say about that. She was a woman of the world. And, also from this point of view, without giving away her secrets. And she looked at me and said, honey, she said, don't you know? Desire begets desire. So when your brother looked at this woman with desire, it is sparked and inflamed a desire within her. We all want to be desired, and it makes us desire the person who desires us. Now, I thought that was pretty good advice about how to get, how to make conquests. What I didn't expect is that it would really be also a very deep description of my discovery of my relationship and humanity's relationship with God. And I will get to all that, but I'm going to have to take a step back to that hippie commune. Is it really a hippie commune? And how, from the part of my sister, who was number 3, but I was number 6, so the first sister is raising those youngest kids. Is there anyone who has that experience there? No? Yeah. And she, at the age of 15, became a fervent Buddhist. My mother was already following a very famous Hindu guru named Bhagaram Das. Anyone hear this guy? Bhagaram Das? Be Here Now? No? Grist for the Mill? No? These books, they were big-time books. In fact, there was a young fellow just a few years older than I was at the time, and he read those books, and he kept rereading them all his life. And that was Steve Jobs. This was his guru as well. And so I was given a lot of training in especially Buddhist meditation. I was very good at it. I could be, in complete, stillness doing the chant for, I was 9 years old, to do it for 4 or 5 hours at a stretch. People would take pictures of me, and I was just pleasing my sister. I just said, look what I can do. There wasn't anything, for me, a conviction of any kind. But, our mother would have us sit down and try to do transcendental meditation. She was horrible at it. We were worse. But she was very good at yoga and that and on. So what I'm saying in all that is that, I did grow up with a very strong influence of Eastern religion. And it's interesting, we all know that for the Buddha. But let's talk about the Buddha for a second. Siddhartha. And I'm going to talk about him because sometimes to talk about one thing, it helps to present the opposite. It brings out more and greater boldness the thing I want to say. Because the New Age movement, which my mother was one of the founders of, there isn't hardly any song I hear or television show I see that doesn't have some influence of this. You can make your own reality, You can just decide what reality is. You can remake your world. Because in essence, it's an illusion. So you decide. You're God. You can do whatever you can think of, right? And these are all, I'm God sort of things. And I grew up with that. I grew up in the very heart of that, the epicenter of that. And the Buddha, I really always go back to this. Where he began, I believe, is where humanly, the same place that Christianity begins, but then we move in directions exactly the opposite. And what is it? That Siddhartha, the story goes, was a Hindu prince. And his father, loving his son and wanting all the best for him, built him this paradise to grow up in. It was just everything that was most beautiful, most pleasurable, most refined, most intriguing surrounded him. And he didn't know suffering. But when he was a young man, he left his father's palace and he went to know the world, and he found to his shock and his horror that men and women suffer. And it's hard. Suffering is, on its face, a horrible thing. And he said, how can we help the world? I mean, people suffer. What can I do about it? So he said, why do people suffer? And this is where we get, you'll recognize the words, that we're getting a rhythm in here. He said, people suffer because they desire what they cannot have, they cannot possess, and therefore they suffer. I even say that, why do people sin? Because we desire, but we don't know what we desire, so we take. It's very close to what he was saying. People desire, but they cannot possess, and so they suffer. Well, how can you fix that? If people realized that what they desire and their very desire for what they desire is an illusion, if they'd be freed of this illusion, then they would be free from all suffering. I was once at a conference, a Catholic Buddhist conference. And I remember seeing this one Buddhist monk. We were in a church that was part of this retreat center where the conference was being held. This one Buddhist monk coming up to, I wonder if you can see it now, coming up and looking up at a crucifix. And looking up there at Jesus, and what was Jesus doing on that crucifix? Suffering. Thank you. And he said, sometimes, like at this conference, I can have moments where I think we are very close. But then I look at this and I think we will never understand each other. Never. Never. So he says the point is to be enlightened, to be liberated from this wheel of desire, of disappointment, of violence and sin, and to realize that your desire is an illusion. But that's a big thing to say your desire is an illusion. I mean, from the moment you open your eyes, you have desires. In fact, when someone says, I want to know myself, what are they trying to understand when I say I want to know myself? What I want, right? If you meet a new person, you don't know who they are. Can you trust them? Can you not trust them? What's the deal? When you figure out that you think you know what they want, what they're after, right? Then you know who they are. Then you say, oh, now I understand. I mean, the very word I can only be spoken when you say, I desire, I want. Otherwise, there is no meaning to this word I. Does that make sense to you guys? I am 55 years old. No! Yes. I'm 55 years old. That doesn't really tell you. I could even do without that. Besides, you can see how old I am. But I can't, if I say I must say I desire, I want, I seek. Does that make sense? Therefore, Buddha was really down on that. He said, that's right, because the I itself, the self, is an illusion. There is no self. It's an illusion. Your very self is an illusion. There's just being. And you are not other than being. And God is not other than being. And when you get that, when you understand, when you become aware of that, then you are enlightened. Then you are released from the wheel and you return to being. Indiscriminate, part of the whole being, free from all suffering, all is fullness. In other words, Buddha looked at life, saw there was suffering, saw the heart of man that desires, and said, to keep people from suffering, we will take away their hearts. What my point is that my experience of Christianity is exactly the opposite. Whereas Buddhism starts saying, look, your desire is not real. Christianity is where finally, in all human history, in all human civilization, I mean, what did, when the Greeks, when they wrote the great plays, or the great theatrical tradition, there are two types of plays. Now, who's done great book studies and who can tell me what the two types of plays are? I'm sorry to do this to you, but you're all being so silent and I'm getting freaked out. Yeah. No, tragedy and farce. There's a little bit of difference there. Because a comedy can still have a meaning. A farce has no meaning. Okay, sorry. But yeah, tragedy and comedy, you're right on there. Just the word is important in farce. Tragedy, because man has a dark and fixed fate. And he's noble. Oh, how he is noble. But he desires, the wrong object of desire. Or he is placed where his desires cannot possibly be fulfilled. And this is a tragedy. But the other one is farce. It's all just does not make sense. It's funny, we have to laugh at it. It doesn't make sense. This was the height of human culture, at least in all the Western Hemisphere. Human culture had not yet known the I, because human beings had never said, this is what I'm made for. They have never perceived the object of desire. And this is what Christ came to say. I am the object of your desire. And therefore the entire Christian path is to go deeper into desire, because a deeper relationship with the object of our desire, which brings out our I more and more, I become more and more myself, so that it screams out my identity. The miracle of the creation of my heart through an ever more intense relationship with the object that my heart was made for, the object of desire. But this is the point of desire. There has to be an object. And we all know that. We all know that. There's this wonderful Christian blogger in Italy called Costanza Miriano. And she writes about family and parenthood and stuff like that. And she's very ironic. She's sort of like the Ann Coulter of, Catholic, family life. But she is extremely self-ironic as well. She was writing, she said that she always writes about herself in the third person. Okay, so she's talking about herself. She says, Costanza, having already determined that she needed no purchases for all this year, and that her husband could, in peace, prepare his budget for the rest of the year without considering, what purchases she personally needed. Walking past a storefront, suddenly discovered that she could not go on living without a certain charming purse and a darling pair of matching shoes. Come on. Whether it's that new, iPad, whether it's that darling purse with a charming pair of matching shoes, which I can't live without, or whether it's, like my brother, walked into town and saw that girl and had to have her. Objects are what call forth desire. Who saw that film with Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins, Silence of the Lambs? Yeah, I'm not recommending it, but there was a certain moment in that film where, there's this evil genius and this good young FBI profiler. She's trying to figure out who's committing these terrible crimes. And she knows that this guy can tell her. So she's having this ever deeper relationship with this evil genius doctor, Anthony Hopkins guy. So finally, when she gives him enough of what he wants, and that she's finally convinced him to give her what she wants, which is how to find this guy, who he is. He says, why does he do what he does? And she thinks about it, she says, because he desires. And he says, and what does he desire? She thinks about it, she says, what he sees. That's right. Now you know how to find him. And she does. Whoever sees it, that's all fine. But this is it. And until the object of our desire appears, we can feel that there's, something's moving in me. It's not enough. I want, but I don't know what. So maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I take. That's where consumerism, gets its power, right? Because you gotta keep taking, because it's never going to be that. What did Oscar Wilde say? There are two great tragedies in life. Every man or woman will have experienced two great tragedies in life. The first tragedy is not getting what you want, not getting what you desire. No, I can't have her. I can't have it. What's the second tragedy? Get it. Is that all? Is that all? We were made for something. But we don't know who we are until that object appears and attracts us. And this is the dynamic of salvation. My grandmother got it right. She was no Christian, no believer, but she got it right. Only the beauty of God can attract. God's way is through enticement and allure. Who says that? Who said that? Said it just 2 months ago. Pope Francis, talking to the bishops of Brazil. God's way is through enticement and allure. Because this is what it is. So, salvation is ultimately a question of attraction. The attraction of God's face, of Jesus. There was a few years ago where a collection, the name of Father Giussani has already come up a couple of times. This whole show we're putting on here, and I'm only putting on this tiny little part of it. There were people who worked very hard for a long time for this. I'm not. I just flew a great distance to get here. But Father Giussani is the one who showed us how to really see Jesus, and therefore to really, for the first time in our lives, to know who we are, what we want, and therefore to find our place in this universe, and therefore find the meaning of everything in this universe. But I'll get to that. But he published, he was still alive when this book came out. It was a collection of some of his conversations with people, and it was called Attrattiva Gesù. Attrattiva Gesù. So Barbara, you remember this? You remember that? Okay, Frank, you don't remember that. All right, that's all right. Keep that camera going. How many batteries you got next? Is it going to be all right? I can speak faster. Okay. So Attrattiva Gesù, which literally means the attractiveness Jesus. But they were wondering how to translate it, and I came up with this one. God, he's good looking. Yeah. They decided not to go with that one. I don't know. Because it's only when we come into relationship with other things that we discover who we are. But we only really come out of ourselves through attraction. Fear has the opposite effect. These are very deep questions for me. Because as you can imagine, being raised, it was the whole question of, I. But I in that sense of solid, consistent, creative, with a purpose and that sense of I, only grows with a relationship with something solid and objective. And I had very little of that. I was raised with a very strong political vision, very left, very strong political vision that had a lot of rightness to it, justice and all that stuff. But I didn't really have an education of the self. I'm not the only one. And I remember at a certain point in my life, when I was finishing my master's in Berkeley, and the plan that I had had for my future fell through. And I was really left, I really thought there's no way that this isn't going to happen, and it didn't happen. And I went to a mentor of mine, and I said, well, I don't know what to do. I've sort of had it all planned, and now I don't have any plans. And he said, look, you're good at what you do. You're good at this theology thing, the study thing, the writing thing. Why don't you go get a doctorate? I said, all right. I don't have any money. He says, don't worry, I'll take care of everything. And I said, oh, yeah, that's very kind of you. And he said, well, there are things I want in return, but we'll get to that. And, but we went on talking, and he said, so what do you want to study? You heard that question, right? You heard that question. What did he ask me? Rita? Frank? What? What do you want to study? And what did I answer? It would be so interesting if someone would, take this doctoral thesis. Or that it would help the church so much if someone could develop this other, doctoral thesis. Or I see a real need that someone really... And you say, hey. You didn't hear my question. My question was, what? What do you want? And I said, all right, yeah. But within 2 minutes, I was back on my old track. So finally, well, I think I want X. He said, look, go ahead, begin, but I have a feeling you're going to discover 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, this is not what you're willing to give your life to. This isn't what you want. And at that time, you got to be free and come back and tell me. We can start all over. It's no problem. But if this is going to work, you have to do what God is calling you to, and He calls you through desire. But as we all know, and I've already indicated, this desire isn't just any desire, because we have lots of desires, right? And I get, it's like Costanza. I don't have any desires. Oh my God, look at that! I have to have that. Okay, now I do. But how much does that show me about my eye? Is that the desire? This is the question. I'm going to get away from it for a second, but I would like to return for just a moment to the analogy of man-woman desire as an image of salvation. Because it's not just me who's saying this, okay? It's not just me who's saying it. Much of the biblical tradition says this. What is in all four Gospels, Jesus gives many different parables about the wedding feast. There was a wedding feast, right? And they were all invited. Well, that's not by accident. We are invited to a wedding feast. And the Psalms talk again and again about God will delight in His people as a groom delights in his bride. How does He delight in His bride? This is an analogy, only an analogy, of course, but it's one that God has given us. I would just like to read a couple sentences from the Song of Songs. That's are any Protestants here? All right, that's not your fault. So, in any case, you don't have this book in your Bible, and we have it in our Bible. So you say, well, it's not in the Bible. Well, then you're only half right. His arms are rounded gold set with jewels. His body is an ivory work encrusted with sapphires. His legs are alabaster columns set upon, actually, maybe you should come up and read this. I'm getting a little embarrassed for you. Set upon bases of gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as the cedars. His speech is most sweet. He is altogether desire. But that is the position of the soul in front of God. Now here's God's position in front of us. How fair and pleasant you are, O loved one, delectable maiden. You are stately as a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. I say I will climb the palm tree and lay hold of its branches. Oh, may your breasts be like clusters of the vine, and the scent of your breath like apples, and your kisses like the best wine that goes down smoothly, gliding over lips and teeth. He goes on a lot about breasts. I can understand that. But this is the Bible I'm talking about. It's a deep analogy. It's a deep analogy. I'm going to get away from it, but we're going to get back. I'm going to do it because we all know that it's easy for someone to inspire greed within us or lust within us. And this is it. This is what 90 or 99% of all advertising is, right? We are soaked with advertising. But the encounter with Christ is the awakening of desire, but it is the desire, not a desire. The desire. And this is what I'm going to be talking about the rest of the time here. Okay? Are you still with me? Yes. Okay. I thought once I talked about, an ivory sculpted, man, and, a woman's, wonderful cluster breasts, I thought this would get someone away. Okay? It's in the Bible, all right? It's in the Bible. Okay. Because the true desire is the desire that doesn't just draw out my sexual instinct or my greed or my desire for comfort or my desire to protect myself from the infinite dangers of life. This is an object that draws out something that goes much deeper. And we don't even know ourselves until it is drawn out. How many love songs say, I never knew the truth and I never knew myself until I met you? That's not stupid. That's not stupid. There's this beautiful scene. There's this beautiful scene in A Man for All Seasons, which is one of my top 5. Anyone else have this as a top 5, A Man for All Seasons? Good. We have a lot in common. All right. So, the scene is A Man for All Seasons is a beautiful, beautiful stage work translated a couple times into film about the last 2 years of the life of St. Thomas More, who was a lawyer and then a government official and then Chancellor of all England under Henry VIII. The one of many wives. We got that guy. Also the guy who took the church, in England, out of the church and made it the Church of England. And that's why to this day, the monarch of England is the head of the Anglican communion. They call them Episcopalians in this country. But that's how it all started. So St. Thomas More was this, that no one was closer to the king than St. Thomas More. But when he started to do this sort of thing, St. Thomas More said, well, I just can't go along with that. I can't go along with that. But all bishops except 2 went along with that. What's wrong with you? All the lords went along with that. What's wrong with you? And he had this companion, St. Thomas. He had this companion who was the Duke of Norfolk. The dukes are the highest rank of nobility before the king. It's before the royal family itself. And so there was this guy was making a last, Thomas, come and be with us. Why don't you even believe your bishops? Okay, there are 2 bishops, but why don't you believe me, your friends? Why don't you just come with us? Why not be faithful to your king? so St. Thomas, and I'm about to quote him here, St. Thomas decides that he has to break with this guy, otherwise their friendship is going to get him killed. So he has to show him what the difference between them is. And he ends up saying this. First of all, he says, aren't all you noble guys trying to create a new breed of dog? He says, yeah, what is it? So it's a water spaniel. He says, and what would you do, says Thomas, what would you do with a water spaniel that was afraid of water? Why, you'd hang it. Well, as a spaniel is to water, so is a man to his own self. I will not give in because I oppose it. I do. Not my pride, as you accuse me of. Not my spleen. Not any of the other of my appetites, but I do. More goes up to him and feels him up and down like an animal. Margaret's voice is heard, calling her father. But Moore's attention is irresistibly caught by this. And he turns back to babe Norfolk. Norfolk, after he makes this examination, like you test a dog or a horse or something by feeling their muscles. Is there no single sinew in the midst of this that serves no appetite of Norfolk's but is just Norfolk? There is. Give that some exercise, my lord. And then he insults him. Norfolk strikes him, and they part forever. It's not just any appetite. It's not just any desire. It's not this appetite or that fear or another. It's the one object of attraction that draws out my eye. Me, Vincent. What's this gospel say? That God will call us each, draw us each, by name, the eye. Now being, one of my first insights into the Bible was I was becoming a Christian. And it took me years to get around to doing this. Because I just wasn't interested. I was interested, once I started getting involved in the church, I had already had my education, my religious education, my political education and all of that. And we were raised in my generation as being on the civic commune to believe that we were the ones who were going to remake civilization, remake human society, remake the human being with this new experience. The new age, right? And so when I became a Catholic, I thought I was supposed to do that in the church. So I was all against all this doctrine and stuff like that. So it took me years to actually open up the gospel and read it. I'd been to church, I'd heard people read it. And I always heard in church about this nice, kind, sweet, gentle Jesus. And when I opened up the gospel, I kept on saying, where is that guy? Where is that guy? This guy looks like a very difficult guy to be with. He was. And in the past 30 years that I've been reading the gospel with a lot of attention, I have to say I'm only more and more confirmed in this. Come on. When that Canaanite woman whose daughter was dying went up to him and said, help my daughter, what did he say? No, you dog. And I have lived 10 years in the Middle East, and I'm telling you, that is the ultimate insult. And Jesus insulted her like that. This was not an easy guy. But he was a volcano of compassion and truth. And being with Jesus was fascinating, thrilling, compelling, stunning, and overwhelming. But it was never easy. There was a constant purification involved. Constant purification. As the disciples became more and more attached to him. First of all, this is really, let's get this straight. This is new for the world, that a great religious leader who really has insight, really has incredible human insight, talks about himself. I remember through that, I met some other Sikhs who were Catholics, and one of them was saying to me that when she was first given the Gospels, and she first read through the Gospels, she was horrified. She was disgusted. And she had been raised with a very deep Eastern religious tradition. And the last thing anyone in the Eastern tradition would ever do is to say, me. When, you don't even exist, so what's that all about? It's all about the path, the spiritual practice, the process of enlightenment, right? It's all about the path, the wisdom. But with Jesus, they're very, very, relatively little of the Gospels is the teaching of Jesus. It's about who Jesus is. It's an attachment to Him. This is the new thing. Really the new thing. But as they became more and more attached, He moved them further and further from what they thought they were attached to. And what did they think they were attached to? Well, who remembers the very last thing that the apostles said to Jesus? I'm pretty sure it was Philip. It doesn't say Philip in the Acts of the Apostles. I just think it was Philip, but I'm not going to tell you why. So, but there it is, Jesus on, Mount of Olives. He's getting like this because he's about to ascend, to his Father. So he's getting ready to ascend to his Father, and just as he did, the last thing that the apostles say to him is what? Does anyone remember? Last thing. Last thing is, hey, is this when you're going to get rid of the Romans? I could just hear, Jesus as he's ascending into heaven. Stay in Jerusalem, I'll send you the Holy Spirit, we'll work this out. It was a constant process of purification. Well, look, the Last Supper, right? Last Supper. What happens at the Last Supper? This is in John and Luke. What happens? Jesus, decides he has to show them a lesson. Why does he have to show them a lesson? What was happening at the Last Supper? A dispute broke out among disciples regarding who was the greatest. They realized he was attractive, but what was the attraction? They needed to be purified. They thought it was for their own power, for the power of their people, for success, for victory, national victory. Then an argument broke out among them, which of them should be regarded as the greatest. They came to him and said, grant that in your glory we may sit on your right and on your left. Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom of Israel throughout the Romans? But little by little he purifies their object of desire, their point of attraction. What emerges with him is the attractiveness of life. Not this appetite or that appetite in life, but life. Life as life. Eternal life. Life that is plugged into the only source of life, which is love. A life in which one discovers to not have lost anything, but to have gained all. Life in which all things living, and even all things existing, instead of becoming more and more alien, become more and more intimately perceived, known, and loved. What does it mean to be young? It means you're attracted to so many things. You're so stupid because you know how to judge it. But you're attracted because everything has a promise. Everything has a promise. And you believe that it's the promise of happiness. I can't go to the party. I'm going to die. The parents are looking at this daughter, 15-year-old daughter, do hysterics because they say she can't go to the party. And she says she'll never talk to them, and I hate you. And she slams the door, and I'm going to run away, and I'm going to kill myself. I can't live here anymore. It's only a party. But there's a promise. Right? There's a promise in this. And the promise is happiness, eternal happiness. But what happens when we get older? Well, and we do, we get out of the house, we get to go to all the parties that we want, and boy, that gets old. You know what? To be old, to get old means we're the limit that things, I think the limit that everything has in this world, the limit of things predominates over its promise. Things don't promise you anything anymore. I don't care. What is that? I'm not attracted. I don't. You know, it's easy to see someone who doesn't listen to the news, doesn't want to meet anything new, isn't interested in going there or there, right? They're just not. There's no promise there. There's no attraction anymore because they've seen the limit. To be with Jesus, to have the eye brought out by its true object of attraction, means that we begin to perceive the fulfillment of the promise of everything. Everything becomes more interesting, more beautiful, because we are in relationship with the one who fulfills the promise of everything. We are no longer wounded by the limits, because we no longer think that you, my object, this job that I was looking for, this person I wanted to have, I am no longer saying you're the one who has to make me live. I am with the Lord of life. And therefore I see the beauty of your beauty. I see the beauty of the promise that your presence makes to me. But it's not a violence of possessing you anymore. But this invitation to go to the house of the Father together. Forever. And there is then this constant purification that has to happen so that we can come to sing, as in the book of Daniel, cold and chill, bless the Lord, praise and exalt him above all forever. Everything growing on the earth, bless the Lord, praise and exalt him above all forever. Father Giussani, wrote once. He wrote it in a book called You Can Really, live like this. That's how it's translated in English, I think, right? And he wrote, you can live life in simplicity. In this way. Simplicity, he says, parenthetically, means the calm in the heart when it is drawn to the one object of desire that satisfies. A simple person, a simple heart. And he goes on, you must let yourself respond to the attraction, not any attraction, but the attraction of what is more, what is greater, what is more beautiful, what is better. He doesn't stop there, though. He gets pretty tough at this point, like Jesus. You know, and I'll give a couple examples that Jesus was really tough on this point. But Father Giussani goes on to say, the person who starts out afraid of what is greater loses as well that which is less. Everything attracts us. But if we don't let ourselves be attracted by the one thing that promises us life in and of itself, life that comes from the very fountain of life, which is God's love, we will even lose the lesser that we dared for, because ultimately will show us its limit. You know how it is. You get that car, you love that car, and then one day it stops, and you're on the freeway, and there's no shoulder, and you don't love that car. And suddenly, every time there's a car commercial, you're saying, oh, that looks great. My car doesn't. And it's the way it is, right? But if we are not purified in our desire, to desire first and above all the one object of desire that brings forth our heart, if we don't risk for that, if we just risk for what we think we can get our hands on, because you'll never get your hands on Jesus. You have to let him get his hands on you. That's the thing. You'll never get your hands on Jesus, but you can let him put his hands on you. You can never possess him. You can be possessed by his love that calls to you. But unless we risk for that, then all desires are vain. You know, we are so accustomed to thinking of ourselves as a jumble of impulses, because that is how the world sees us. A jumble of impulses. Now I want this, now I feel like this, and now I don't want this, and now I think this, right? And that's me. But that's just me. That's not you. That's not you. Unless we can say, you are the one I'm on earth for. You're the one I exist for. And you're the only one who says credibly to me, I will be with you forever. Look, we started out with my grandmother. And she said, desire begets desire. This is the event of purification. This is the event where it all happens. I'm getting to the end now. I'll get back to my grandmother. It's a sign we're getting to the end. Is that okay? Are these chairs still comfortable after all this time? Okay, thanks a lot. What's your name?
Matthew.
Hey, Matthew. You look like you're in good company tonight. Yeah. Just one. Yeah. Okay. But it's desire that begets desire. The event, ultimately, that draws us to God is because Jesus, the Spirit of Jesus, dwelling among some that He has chosen, becomes apparent to us when we see that they want the good of our life more than we do. They are more willing to suffer for my good than I am. They have a greater passion for my life than I do. Their desire for my heart and the good of my heart is more than my desire. But their desire begins to inflame my own. This happened for me for the first time, and we're getting towards the end. I feel so sorry. I'm going to miss you. But I remember, look, has anyone here ever heard of something that only existed for a short time and, 3,000 miles away in the city of San Francisco called the St. Ignatius Institute? Okay, good. So some people have. It was this really, Catholic, ramrod on Catholics. I ended up there, I found myself to be outraged, by their rigidity, their doctrinalism, their negative judgment of modern sexual ethics. Homosexuality is a disorientation of the human spirit, or all the hot topics, masturbation or premarital sex, the whole bit. For me, that was, I'd been an active Catholic for years. No one had ever said any of those things. Just my Mormon sister, and I thought she was out of her mind. Thank God us Catholics were not like that. So, I would just say that I really took my opposition to them very seriously. Because they just had to figure out that they were all wrong, and I was going to make it. So, this was got to such a point that twice in the years I studied there, the founder and rector, Father Joseph Facio, called me to his office to inform me that another professor had accused me of trying to kill him. I'm not kidding. That is absolute truth. And the first time I said, that guy is so crazy, that's it. Then I thought about it, yeah, but if he died, that'd be okay. I would organize, the St. Ignatius Institute would organize something for its students. I'd organize a counter or something, I took all the students I could get my hands on to see Life of Brian, Are we understanding that? No. And, but, I came from a very poor family. We weren't living in a summer shack for nothing all year long. And I came from a very poor family. And going to a private Jesuit school, and I'm sorry to say, they treated me like crap. I mean, really, it was incredible. And twice, I remember, for example, this one time, Bank of America sent me, this loan for $10,000. You have your loan for studying $10,000, and the check will be available at this branch on this day. Well, this day was 10 days after the, registration day. So I went to the registrar. I said, here's the money in 10 days is going to be here. It's going to be here. He said, so what? You're not studying this year. Goodbye. That was that. I said, but I didn't know what to do. So I went to Father Fessio. I know all those things, but I went to Father Fessio and I said, here. He got right up, went to the secretary, said, write out the check for these thousands of dollars. She said, where will I take the money from? He said, the salaries. He says, but this money has to come back, right? It's got to be here by the end of the month. And I said, don't worry. But it turned out to be extremely complicated, but it did happen. I did get the money back. But, when they finally did send him away from the Think Missions Institute, they said it was for financial mismanagement. I always wondered if it was because of this. But anyway, there was another time when he did something similar, a massive, intervention to keep this university from sending me away for mistakes that the university made. The university made a mistake in my transcripts, so therefore I wasn't going to graduate. That was it, bye-bye. But he intervened. So it was the day before graduation, and I went to his office, and I said, we had our discussions, but I know I wouldn't be graduating without you, so thank you. He says, oh, no, don't thank me, he said. Vincent, we need more students like you. I just stared at him like this, but what I wanted to do was I said, is there another Vincent here? And he said, no, because, you asked all the hardest questions, but then you stayed there to listen to the answers. So everybody learned. All the students who were in class with you learned more than any of the other students, because we need more students like you. And when I looked at him, I realized that, I had done my best to make him suffer. And I think I had probably succeeded at least once or twice. But it didn't matter to him. If this suffering could contribute to my coming closer to seeing God in His true face, it didn't matter to him. He was much more willing to suffer for my good than I was. Even though I wasn't sure he understood what my good was. I couldn't but be amazed by his willingness to suffer for me. One time I was with a whole group of seminarians from my society, and they're all from the movement of communal liberation. And I said, what got you here? Why did you come into the seminary? Why did you think you had a vocation? Where did that all start? Where was that? And there were about 8 of them. And I had all 8 of them give, 15, 20, we stayed there all night. And all of them ended up saying the same thing. At a certain point, there was someone who took me more seriously than I took myself. Someone who was more interested in my life than I was. And I couldn't but be interested in that. Desire begets desire. God's desire for us. This is the motor, not our desire for God. What did St. Paul say? Love of God consists not so much that we have loved Him, but that He has loved us first. Desire begets desire. And the one who desires us becomes that object, who desires us in a way that leaves nothing out, that promises everything, that delivers everything, at least as a foretaste, eternal life, perfect love, absolute truth, total beauty, real justice. This is the desire that brings forth the true This is salvation. And even as Michael so beautifully said, I wanted to say, right on, brother, about 8 times when he was talking. This is the point. Where the I emerges and is saved. This is the point where we can finally say, hey, I'm right, you're wrong. Listen to this, St. Thomas said. Or listen to this, the Gospel says. Or listen to this, Father Giussani says. But instead, everything comes down to this. Come and see. Come and see. And what do we see? What do we see? Don Massimo Cavazasca, the founder of the Fraternity of St. Charles Borromeo, to which I belong, said, the first and most fundamental movement of our spirit in every moment consists in going out of ourselves in order to adhere to someone calling to us, attracting us to himself. It is the explosion of this experience, the returning to this experience, that becomes inevitably an inviting into this experience. That is the very event of salvation. We mustn't back away from the analogies that can be made, as I said, with human love. But we must let that be purified, really purified. I'll tell you one little story and that's the end. It's going to take just 30 seconds. My mother was involved in that group of writers that was writing for something called the Transcendental Review, but at a certain point decided to change its name to the New Age Journal. She was one of those. So, you can imagine what that's all about. You've all heard of New Age, right? That's Stephen? Yeah. Well, you didn't say. So, life goes on, lots of things happen. I have a very close relationship, always have, with my mother. Pretty much the only one of all the brothers and sisters who did, but that's another story. And, but of course, this whole thing was not for her. She said that to me many times. This whole thing was not for her. And then, after my first year at seminary, Don Massimo came to visit. And he was there for 2 or 3 days, and he didn't speak English, they don't speak Italian. We got together sometimes, it wasn't very successful. Oh, okay, we tried, and it goes. About a month later, I'm in the garden with my mom, and she looks over and she says, hey, you know the priest in this town? I said, Mom, I'm a seminarian, I know the priest in this town. Well, introduce me. I said, oh, yeah? Are you sure? Yes. I didn't say anything more. I was thinking, well, I really respect this guy. He's a very faithful priest, but he has like the human warmth of a porcupine. And, but I said, okay. So they go into the office, 2.5 hours. They come out. They barely look at me. They just walk in front of me. I follow them. They go in the church. My mom receives all the sacraments. And, I didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. I did ask her about a month later why. She says, well, when Father Massimo was here, I saw how much the church loves you. And then later, much later, because my mother had been an orphan, had been, had grown up in terrible situations and had been regularly sexually abused and all this sort of stuff. And affection was not her big, strong suit. But she later, years later, said, but don't you see, it wasn't that she was convinced of the doctrine or the ethics. said, I want to be able to love you like that. So I had to come into the church. Desire is desire. It's salvation, it's mission. And attraction is its strength. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was beautiful. And, it may be that not everyone will come back to all the events tomorrow and on Sunday, but this is something that builds, and it's important to that we hold on to what Father Vincent was talking about. There will be multiple opportunities to deepen this through the other things that are said and that are talked about discussed in the next day and a half. So on that note, I just want to invite, really extend a strong invitation to all of you to come back tomorrow. Starting at 10 a.m., there will be the first event, a panel presentation on the life of Jerome Lejeune, this very interesting and important geneticist. We have Dr. Mark Bazik going to speak to us, and Ombretta Salvucci, a scientist at the NIH. So some very eminent people are going to talk, who are very devoted to and know a lot about both genetics and Jerome Lejeune. We're going to speak about him. At 1 p.m. there's going to be a presentation on Dante and the journey of faith. Professor from University of Pittsburgh, Dennis Looney, a graduate student from the Medieval Institute at Notre Dame, and a brother of Father Vincent, deacon of the Society of St. Charles, will be here also. At 3 p.m. I'm going to be interviewing a friend of ours named Carlo Lancilotti, who works, is a math professor, but he's also a co-founder of Crossroads in New York City, which is a community liberation-related group that sponsors discussions and events of a cultural sort that are interested in the relation between culture and faith. And that will be at 3 p.m. We'll be talking about Catholic faith and American culture. At 4:30 p.m. we're going to have a witness by a friend of ours named Frank Simmons about suffering and how suffering has meaning, how he's discovered that in his own life. 6 p.m. we'll have Mass with Father Vincent celebrating. And at 8 p.m. tomorrow, there's a poetry reading, a combination poetry reading and performance of some songs. And we call this the beauty of the encounters. I invite you to come back for that. And then on Sunday, the only event at 2 p.m. Is a very interesting talk by a friend of ours named Giorgio Ambrosio, who was directly involved in the discovery of the Higgs boson, which you may remember from 2 summers ago. He's a particle physicist, and the title of his talk is "The God Particle in Us: A Quantum Leap from the Subatomic to the Human." So some of you may remember from last year, Massimo Roberto, who is also a very eminent scientist, and he studies the big things, and Giorgio studies the very small things, but they're both really compelling. So I hope you'll come to hear him. I want to remind you that there is a book table in the back of the auditorium with a variety of different books for sale.
Including mine.
Yes, maybe one copy left. And I remind you also that in the undercroft of the cathedral there are 2 exhibits that you can visit. And these are a great way to learn about more completely, more thoroughly some of these topics. But there's one that is 37 panels about the life of Jerome Lejeune and his discoveries and his pro-life activity. And then there's another one on entitled "Earth, the Human Habitat: The exceptional features of our small planet. So both of these really are an opportunity to go deeper into some of the scientific issues that the panels that I talked about are discussing. Also at the undercroft of the cathedral, you'll find delicious Latino foods of both the savory and sweet sort. So I invite you to, speaking of desire, I invite you to go down there and yes, well, yeah, that's it.
Later.
But no, there's some wonderful items down there, so please do patronize them. So thank you very much, and that's the end for tonight, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow and Sunday.